Hi everyone, I hope you're well. My name is Kate and I'm a psychologist from Inspire Therapy. So I'll just get our slides ready and we can get started. Um, and first of all, I hope that you're getting on okay at the moment, given everything that's going on here in Dubai. I hope that you'll find some of the content helpful for you and for your family. So the session we're going to look at today is supporting your child's anxiety in the current UAE context, and it's about building understanding of what anxiety is, how we can recognize symptoms in it, and then hopefully this will enable you to better support your child. So just an overview. The session today is geared towards anxiety as a topic in general. However, we will look at specifics around how the current situation in Dubai impacts our levels of anxiety and what we can be aware of in terms of supporting people who are experiencing heightened anxiety as a result of what's going on. So we'll look at what anxiety is, how do you experience anxiety, and it's very different for everyone. What does it look and feel like? Uh, what does it look like at different ages? Symptoms in your child, and we'll look at 8 different strategies we can use to support your child when they're going through a period of anxiety. Okay, so if we think about what anxiety is, it's a natural reaction to stress and it's a healthy response. And um, w- when we think about what's happening at the moment here in Dubai, we are all experiencing a certain amount of anxiety that is natural because of the severity of the situation that we're in and the uncertainty that's attached to it. But anxiety is our natural reaction to stress or perceived threats. Um, and it's a way to protect us. A certain amount of anxiety is a positive thing because it motivates us to act and to take action. However, when it is happening too frequently and it's impacting our day-to-day functioning, then it can be very debilitating. It can involve intense, persistent, or overwhelming worry that interferes with our daily life. So, if going to school, it could be socializing with friends, it could be participating in extracurricular activities or hobbies. And again, we need to think about how it's impacting your child and how they're enjoying their life and friendships and things like that. When we think of anxiety, it can be feelings of fear, dread or unease about what might happen. And again, this relates very much to the context that we're in at the moment. So, when we are anxious, it can lead us to have a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So, when we say a fight response, this means that we approach something maybe with anger or we're defensive. It could be that we're questioning authority. Maybe you're asking yourself, why can't I get answers at the moment about when this situation is going to end? How much at risk am I? If it's a flight response, then it may be that you want to avoid the situation or, I want to get out of Dubai, I want to get away from this situation. When we freeze, we are blocking our ability to communicate about things and to open up a dialogue about what's causing the anxiety. We want to just block out the response. A fawn response may be that we want to, rather than considering other people, your child might tell you that they're fine, that it's not bothering them. They're more concerned about their siblings' anxiety level or what's happening with you. However, they may be experiencing anxiety, but their way is to kind of defer their own feelings for the better of other people instead. And as I mentioned, in some situations, anxiety can be helpful. For example, it keeps us safe in dangerous situations. It can prompt us to maybe study for an exam or prepare for a difficult conversation. Um, and again, we will look at what happens when these feelings persist and become problematic and impact our day-to-day life. Sorry, just bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to show you a short video now, and I want you to have a look at this and think about what each child says how their anxiety looks and any strategies that they have come up with that help them to manage it.
10 years old, 12 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old. Well, I'm really good at making people laugh. I'm actually really good at reading. I could kind of juggle. Dancing. Fishing for a lot of fish. I'm bored. I like to play basketball. I like to read. I go to my pool. Running, biking, swimming. Something I worry about is my cousin because I don't want him to get bullied. My family, my future, tests. I don't like the pressure. Just does not feel good. Being worried feels like frightened or scared or nervous. Like my heart is beating faster and faster and faster. Like something's wrong. I like those butterflies in my stomach. To relieve stress, I like to talk about it with my mom. Drink water to just help the process. Then I just calm down. Breathe in, breathe out. Like, lay down, listen to music, putting my mind on something else. Cuddle with my cat. Think.
Okay, so in this video example, we can see that the way anxiety presents is very different for each child, but a lot of the time they're talking about physical symptoms, um, feeling butterflies in their stomach, feeling worried. So each child is given their own take on how it feels for them. And when they talk about ways that they have learned to cope with it, some of these things might be things that you use yourself or you see your child using. So, um, cuddling with their pet, drinking water. The other example I think was talking to their mum, so a trusted adult. And these are all positive strategies. So you may find that your child is already using some of these strategies and or I hope from today you'll get some ideas of new things that you can try. And now just to put this back over to you, has the current instability in the UAE caused you to feel anxious? And obviously, we're all experiencing a certain level of anxiety, so I'm sure the answer to this is yes. But how did you react to this situation? So, what has been your thought process, and how has it impacted you? And have you found any useful strategies that are helping you to cope at the moment? Personally, I find that sometimes looking at facts about security helps me to feel a bit calmer because then it reassures me that I'm in a place that has amazing defensive security. I'm looking for things that help me feel a bit more able to keep calm and trust in what's happening around me. So everyone has their own way of dealing with stressful situations. But it's good to think about at the moment, is there anything that you do in day-to-day life that helps you when you're in a stressful situation, and maybe you have a strategy that's working well already. And it's also good to think about how it impacts you. So what kind of symptoms do you find that you have when you're feeling anxious? And we're going to have a look at those symptoms in a bit more detail. So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, anxiety presents very differently for different people, and it's important to, I suppose, have a look at everyone individually. And some of these things will apply, some of them won't apply. There can be cognitive symptoms, things like excessive worrying, and not being able to let a worry go. So ruminating and continuing to go back over and over something. There, you could have racing thoughts, catastrophic thinking, where you think the worst case scenario, overestimating danger and underestimating your ability to cope with the situation. So at the moment, it's quite easy to, because it's such an unknown for us to feel that we're in an extremely dangerous situation. However, none of us are really that, we unless we're working for like the intelligence or something, we don't have the information to be clear about the actual level of danger that we're in. So sometimes then that can lead us to our thoughts to spiral. This can lead then to maybe difficulty concentrating. Our mind goes blank when we're trying to, your child might be trying to do a task at school. constantly asking what if questions, and it doesn't really end because it doesn't help to settle things, and needing constant reassurance. And that could be from you or from a friend or someone else in their environment. So again, symptoms that can also present are physical. Just like in the video, we saw that many of the children talked about uh, different physical symptoms. So when we're anxious, our fight or flight system is activated and our heartbeat increases. We can be short of breath, dizzy. We might feel faint or sick, especially maybe in the morning when your child is going to school, if they have any anxiety about going to school. It can be then that nauseous feeling. It may be impacting their digestion. Maybe they need to go to the toilet more often than normal. It could be sweating, hot flushes, physically shaking or trembling. You might feel muscle tension or fatigue. And this might look like when you're going to bed or when your child is going to bed. They, I sometimes find that if I have something very stressful going on in my life, that when you're busy in the day, the time then when it starts to really you think about it is when you lie down and try to go to sleep, and then things start coming into our head, and it can be hard to switch off, and that can lead to poor sleep and that feeling of being on edge but tired as well, which isn't good for us in the longer term because obviously we need sleep to recover and to help our brains to be able to process what's going on in our surroundings. Some other symptoms can be emotional, so feeling on edge or restless, being irritable or snappy. And you might find that your young person is a bit more snappy at the moment, especially with the school routines disrupted as well. It can be a sense of dread or impending doom. So that feeling sometimes when you wake up in the morning, and at the moment I feel sometimes anyway that I'm like waiting to hear what's the next bit of bad news. Feeling overwhelmed easily. And I suppose that we all have a certain level of stress that we can deal with. And when we reach our capacity, then it just feels like a small thing can push us over the edge. Being unusually tearful or sensitive, and maybe it impacts our confidence as well because we start to question ourselves, question our abilities. Maybe if you're giving a presentation, for example, you worry about your ability to do a good job with that. Some behavioral signs then might lead to your child avoiding situations. It could be social events or participating in a hobby, procrastinating or freezing, finding it difficult to get started with it, with study, for example. If they're really anxious about exams, it could be safety behaviours, sitting near an exit, checking things repeatedly. And I think at the minute when we hear sounds of airplanes overhead, and especially when things started off, it's natural that we're looking out the window or we're going outside to see what we can see in the sky. It can lead on to trouble sleeping or needing an adult nearby. A friend of mine mentioned that her daughter is coming into her a lot in the night now because she's having nightmares and because of the sound of the explosion. So those things can impact our sleep. It can lead to a withdrawal from friends or activities, so not being interested in interacting with people that usually we enjoy spending time with. The final section we'll look at then is perfectionism and over responsibility. So you may find that when your child is anxious, they're overly hard on themselves. They get frustrated when they don't get top marks or they don't do as well as they thought they should do. They get upset when they make small mistakes and they're just setting the bar really high for themselves. And it can be so difficult to meet that expectation. And because of that, then it can be very upsetting uh, when we're constantly failing in our own eyes. This might lead to trying to control situations because you feel like things that are, if there's things out of your control, then you try and control other things that are possibly within your control. Um, some children can act older than their age and carry too much responsibility. And again, it probably links into control, but also just being able to kind of put across that everything is fine when deep down they are feeling anxious about maybe it's a life change or a situation that's happened in the home. It could be a move, for example, moving to a different country, coming to Dubai for the first time, going to a new school. Um, so again, putting on a front that things are okay when deep down they may actually be more stressed out and anxious about things than they're letting on. So if we think about when anxiety then can become a problem, when we see it happening on a daily basis. So I just want to again here just discriminate between the natural amount of anxiety that we feel at the moment because of the uncertainty of the situation that we're in versus anxiety that persists on a daily basis when you're in a normal routine. It's out of proportion to the situation. Your child finds it hard to control. It kind of takes over them. It's interfering with schoolwork, relationships, daily life, their ability to access day-to-day activities. Your child world, your child's world gets smaller because they avoid situations that are causing them anxiety. Just give me 1 second. Okay, the next section then. So how does it look like across different age groups? And we have talked about symptoms and they can present across all ages. But again, it's certain symptoms are more prevalent with certain age groups. So with younger children, they can be more clingy, more tantrums, and more physical symptoms. With teens, it can be greater irritability, maybe refusing to go to school. And with adults, we can have constant worry, physical tension, avoiding certain activities, and burnout. So now we've looked at what anxiety can look like and the symptoms to look out for, and how it's individual to each child or each person, and how it can be different across age groups. Um, so what strategies do we have in place then to help our children when they are feeling anxious? So I wanted to start off with strategies that relate to the current situation that we're in. So when we're exposed to the bombing scenario at the moment, what can we do to help our children feel more calm and collected? So we want to re-establish a sense of safety as a first priority. So what research shows us is that a feeling of safety is the foundation of recovery when people have been through a traumatic experience. So in practice, what can that look like? So it might mean explaining what is to be done to keep everyone safe. And you may talk through things with your child about where to go in the house if we hear the bombing outside, where is a safe space at home. Um, it may mean for younger children that you stay more physically close to them. And we know from research as well that children regulate through the adults in their environment. So your presence and being calm and collected is really important because your child will look at you and they will mirror what they see. And on the flip side, if you're really stressed out and you're panicking and showing physical signs of being stressed out and anxious, your child is going to copy that as well. So it links into this point about co-regulation, and it's really important to keep that in mind. And it's not easy sometimes because we're anxious ourselves. We're trying to put on a brave face, and sometimes deep down we are spiraling and questioning, and we have a lot of concerns ourselves. And we will go into this in a little bit more detail in a later slide about strategies you can use to help with that. But again, we need to think about the when we're giving an explanation to a question that's asked, be mindful of your tone of voice, slow your breathing down, sit at your child's level and offer physical reassurance if that's appropriate, if maybe to give them a hug. So we want to build that sense of connection first, especially if they're upset, and then we can talk through things. because the research also shows us that when we can connect with children on an emotional level, it helps them to feel more secure, more closely linked to us, and then they're more likely to engage in conversation about how they're feeling, and that helps them to be able to process what's happening. We want to provide honest but developmentally appropriate information. Generally, for younger children, we want to keep things short. They don't need lots of explanation. We want to keep facts to a minimum and obviously tell the truth, but try and emphasize the safety of what's happening. So you might say, for example, there has been an argument between Dubai and Iran, and because of that, there has been some fighting in parts of our country. However, the police and the army are working really hard to keep us safe. And we're very lucky that we have such support from people in our communities. Then when children are a bit older, so roughly like primary school age, maybe about 7 to 11 age, that we give them more facts, but again, not going into loads of overt detail about deaths and people being, the detrimental effects to the property and things like that. We want to be honest and give facts, but again, to emphasize how security is being maintained. We can also discuss things around probability, like the likelihood of for example, um, so I've just lost my train of thought a little bit. Um, So the probability of a drone actually coming through into Dubai is very small. So again, we look at the facts of the situation and we use things to help the child to see that in the overall context that we still are relatively safe. And we can look for facts that reinforce that message as well. For example, in there was a recent news update where they've given stats on the number of um, missiles that have been fired, but we could say, for example, that 99% of things have been shot down. So that we're trying to back up what we say by giving some numbers as well to help our child to feel a bit more settled and secure. For teenagers then and our older children, it's good to give them more information, but engage them in a conversation about it, ask them what they think. If they are accessing media, that we remind them to be mindful and critical about what they're consuming and to question things, not to take it as gospel truth, what everything that they see online, because there is a lot of uh, untruthful information being shared as well, and we can't always trust videos either. So again, we want to engage them in the conversation, give them the autonomy about their decisions and opinions about things. We can talk a bit more abstractly about political systems or religion as well. And again, let them see that we value what they think and that we give them a choice of what their opinion is. But also to challenge them to be questioning things as well and not to just go with the first piece of information that they hear. So that's just to review then what we want to do is think about the age of the child developmentally and minimal information, but in a safety based and secure kind of emphasis with younger children in particular. And it's best not to share videos as well. And just another kind of point is what I think on this kind of topic, if you have the news on in the background, it can be when children are exposed to that rolling, like breaking news kind of stuff on the TV and they're seeing places getting blown up and like that extreme examples of what's going on at the moment, um, it can cause them to believe that this is, something that's happening right outside their door. So I would be conscious of not letting children be exposed to that as well, because I think it can build anxiety and give us the belief that uh, this is what's actually happening outside when we want to just try and keep things a bit more level as possible. So that leads on then to the point I have there about limiting media exposure. So for both children and ourselves, having like an overload of that, it can be quite detrimental to our mental health. And also from the media's perspective, they are fully aware that when they share bad news and like scary headlines, that draws people in and it keeps the attention on their medium. So we have to keep that in mind as well, that often we aren't getting balanced news. Sometimes, right at the moment, I've had people contact me from different countries. Some people I haven't spoken to in quite a while, and they're really concerned because they're looking at Dubai, well, what they're seeing in other media, and they aren't really getting a realistic view of actually what the reality of it is like it for us here at the moment. So we have to keep that in mind, that we don't want to expose our children to that or protect them from it as much as we can, and ourselves. We want to also maintain predictable routines. So with things going online now, for because the schools are online, can try as best we can as to maintain the same, like, breakfast routine, lunchtime, and try and put a bit of structure in the day, to give our children a new sense of stability at home. It's important then to name and normalize feelings, because what we know is that when we can put a label on something, it helps children to externalize that emotion. So rather than it swirling around inside, if we can name it, it can help them to feel a bit more in control of the feeling, and that they can do something about it. And it's also important that we uh, re normalize what they are feeling, and help our children to see that what it's totally understandable. So, for example, it makes sense that you're feeling scared at the moment, and lots of people feel jumpy when they hear loud noises. Um, and that's very true of even for us as adults. I'm feeling a bit jumpy when I hear those noises at the moment myself. We might say something like your body's trying to protect you. So to help them to understand that their feelings are useful and valid. And then we can expect regressive or behavioral changes. So when we have a situation where it's quite an extreme situation here at the moment, it can lead to um, things like children becoming more clingy, wanting to be around their trusted parent. It can lead to struggling with concentration. For younger children, it could be disrupted sleep, bedwetting, and regressing in terms of where they're at, like normally or developmentally. And that can be just due to the impact of what they're experiencing with all the changes at the moment to their routine. So to help that, we want to support gentle sleeping. Um, so we want to focus on having a good bedtime wind down routine. Um, you can think about temporary co-sleeping if you feel that will help them to settle. And then if they have nightmares, to reassure them that's part, it's totally understandable at the moment, and that you're here to look after them. Um, we can encourage expression in an age appropriate way. So for younger children, that might mean talking to them when they're playing with their toys. Um, we might encourage them to draw what they're feeling, or role play with teddies or dolls or with you. Uh, Storytelling is also really effective because it helps children to understand the sequence of events. It helps them to externalize those internal feelings, and to put a label on them in terms of like the story that's happening. And you might be able to pinpoint where in that sequence they're feeling the most stress. We can also use sand play, or uh, as I mentioned, teddies, small dolls, miniature people, and just let your child express themselves without trying to direct it too much. Try and let them take the lead and guide the play, so that you can see where their thoughts are at. And then you can ask open-ended questions to try and encourage them to speak a bit more about their feelings. Um, it allows processing fear in a more manageable way, and it gives you better insight into where they're at. And in for older children, then obviously the way that they communicate is going to be a lot different. And it may be that you can find a shared activity to do with an older child and ask them, um, you know, what do you think about this? Did you hear like did you hear about the latest news? What's your opinion on that? Or what did you hear about that? So just to get the dialogue going, if you find that your older child is not interested in talking to you, you can try some techniques like asking them what was the best bit of their day, what was the worst bit of their day. Um, and I suppose then giving them the autonomy to have their own opinion on things and their own feelings and to express that, and that you're going to be there to listen and to respect what they think. So this is based on the work by Dan Siegel. So establishing connection to build communication. I've touched on some of this already, but just to go back over it in a bit more detail. So according to this research, we see that connection comes before correction. So what this means is that when we think about how our brain works, there are two parts to our brain. And there is the emotional side of our brain and the logical side of our brain. And when a child is upset, what we want is that we can connect with their emotional side first and help them feel like they've been understood, uh, before we can expect them to listen and follow instructions from us or be able to answer questions. If your child engages, for example, is crying or upset, or they're having a tantrum, rather than immediately going in and asking them to tidy up or to listen to you and like, expect them to be able to follow through on that. We know from research that that is not possible in when you're in that moment, because we're not able to access the logical side of our brain. But if we can connect with our children, so that could be speaking to them in a calm, supportive voice, giving them a hug, giving them some time to settle, then their nervous system will calm down first, and then this allows us to speak about things and teach them how to follow through an instruction or use their words appropriately when their regulation is restored. So children need to feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure. Um, and this helps to wire the brain for secure attachment, so that it builds the pathways associated with emotional regulation, resilience, and stress tolerance. So it starts with how we connect with our children and how we um, relate to them on an emotional level. When we say name it to tame it, we mean that by labeling emotions, it activates the our logical brain. So it means that we're able to externalize those internal feelings and reduce the activation of our amygdala, which is responsible for our emotional responses. So what we're trying to do is move those feelings into a more logical part of our brain, and then enable our uh, children to be able to access that calm and more logical approach. Because when our emotions are heightened, and I'm sure you can think of an example of this yourself, how difficult it is to listen to someone else. For example, if you're having an argument or a difficult conversation with someone and you start feeling a bit maybe anxious or frustrated or upset, the more those feelings rise up, it's very difficult to be able to think calmly and clearly. So that again, it's about trying to find ways for our children to externalize those internal emotions and make them more manageable and easier to understand. So when we attune to our children's feelings and their internal state, what we find is that it strengthens the communication between their emotional brain, or their right brain, and their logical brain, their left brain. And this is really important for their lifelong emotional regulation. And Dan Siegel refers to this as integration. It helps to build trust with us as their carers and the feeling of emotional safety. So we integrate the brain through our relationships, and this is what we mean by first attuning to the emotional part of the brain, and then linking that into the logical part of the brain. Storytelling helps children to make sense of their experience. It helps them to construct a coherent narrative of what's happened. And this helps integrate their memory into the sequence of events. And by doing that, it moves those emotional memories that can be a bit jumbled up sometimes into a bit more of a logical and structured understanding. And that reduces their emotions and that reduces the confusion and the emotional reactions when they can start to have a way to organize their thoughts. And even for ourselves, when we're feeling really wound up or upset about something, often it helps to write down what happened because then it helps us to actually work through the sequence of events. And then we can identify it was at that point that I got upset, or it was no wonder I actually reacted there then because this is what happened before it. So it also helps us to be a bit easier on ourselves and a bit more able to understand why we do become upset at times when we're engaging with other people. Repair is more important than connection. So, when we make a mistake or maybe overreact in a situation, it's important that our children see that we're able to apologize for that and put our hands up and say, I didn't really react in the right way there. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Because then they can see that we're able to take ownership of things and also that it's okay to make mistakes and that nobody's perfect. And that if we make mistakes, we'll forgive ourselves and we will forgive you too. And that helps with building trust and emotional flexibility from our children's perspective. Again, connection builds the capacity to communicate. So when children feel safe and heard by their carers, they can access their emotional, they're able to um calm down their emotions and regulate their emotions, and this enables them to better access their logical thinking. Um, and without that ability to calm down, our brain can sometimes we can stay in that heightened state for longer. And this reduces our ability to articulate thoughts and feelings clearly, and it can just create a situation where that argument or that tantrum can last for longer. So the next strategy we're going to look at is positive and supportive language. So it's about looking at how we frame things and rethinking our language to support our children's ability to deal with anxious feelings. So instead of saying, when we want to normalize feelings, instead of saying, don't be silly, there's nothing to worry about, we can try, lots of people feel worried in the news, in a new or tricky situation. Your brain is trying to protect you, even if it's being a bit overprotective. In terms of then looking at separating the child from the anxiety, instead of saying, you're so anxious at the moment, you can say, it sounds like anxiety is showing up right now, or your worry voice is being loud today. And what that's doing then is separating the emotion from your child. So that we show them that a feeling is something they have, not something that they are. And that makes it more manageable. We can get curious, not critical. So instead of saying, why are you overreacting? We might try, what is your worry telling you might happen? Or when did you start noticing that feeling in your body? So again, it helps your child to be more mindful of what anxiety is how it's presenting for them so that they can become a bit more aware of the feelings and what is in the environment is maybe contributing to those feelings. And also when they see that we're curious and that we're asking things in an open and interested way, it moves away from our children feeling judged for their behavior. Emphasizing coping and strength. So instead of you just need to calm down, we might say, let's try figure what might help your body feel safer. You've handled worries before. What helped last time? Again, this is going to build confidence and problem solving instead of feelings of helplessness. Framing feelings as temporary. Instead of you're always anxious lately, you could say this is a big worry moment, it will pass. Feelings move like waves, we can ride this one together. And again, that's a strategy that may work at the moment given the current situation. Offering presence, not pressure. Instead of you're fine, you need to finish, we might say, I'm here with you. You don't have to face this alone. And this sense of connection helps to calm our children's nervous system and build the connection with us. So the benefits then of reframing our language are it helps children to open up, it reduces shame. If anxiety is described as something normal and understandable, then our children don't feel weird or babyish for having it. And it helps them to communicate more openly about how they're feeling. It builds emotional vocabulary. So when adults label feelings gently, children learn words for their internal experiences, which makes sharing easier. It creates psychological safety. When children know they won't be dismissed or judged, they're more likely to say how they're feeling, or, for example, I feel worried about, instead of hiding something through maybe saying they have a physical difficulty like a tummy ache or they're feeling nauseous, or using anger or avoidance to deal with a situation. It encourages problem solving. So language that focuses on what can help teaches that anxiety is manageable, not overwhelming. So a simple formula parents and teachers can use is notice, normalize, name, and support. For example, I can see your body looks tense, so you notice it. Lots of people feel this way before speaking in class. We normalize the behavior. That might be anxiety showing up. So there you've named it. Let's think about what could help you feel a bit braver. So how are you going to support your child? So the next strategy we're going to look at, this is number 3. Wait a second. Is the cognitive behavioural triangle. And this is a way to help our understanding of how thoughts, feelings, and behaviours are all connected. And you can imagine it as a triangle with 3 corners on it. So our thoughts are what we say to ourselves in our mind. Our feelings are the emotions we experience, and our behaviour is what we do or avoid doing. So each corner has an impact on the other corner. So if a child thinks I'm going to mess this up, they may feel anxious or worried, and that can lead to them avoiding trying a task. Or they might think, I can give this a go, and then they may feel more confident about their ability, and they're more likely to try in that if that's their thoughts and feelings. So the main idea is that we can't always control what happens to our child or how they behave, but we can help them to notice and gently change their thoughts, and that can change how they feel and act. So because sometimes I think it's the natural way to look at things is to focus on the behavior or the actions that your child engages in. And what this shows us is that um when we look at what our child might be thinking or what they might be feeling, it helps give us more of an insight into the behavior. But it also shows us that by changing thoughts and feelings, it can have a positive impact on our behavior. So changing one part of the triangle can have a positive impact on the other part. So using this, the cognitive behavioral triangle, we look at how strategies we can use to help with thoughts. So reframing is a way to change how we look at a situation. And we want to look at it in a more balanced and realistic way. So I just put some examples in about current events. So for example, the thought is I'm worried about our house. It's going to be hit with a drone. So we could reframe this. There are drones being fired at us now, but most of them, in fact, hundreds of them are being intercepted. There is a risk, but the risk is very low. Another way to help with thoughts is journaling. So writing worries down helps to move them from that swirl in our head into something more concrete and manageable. And again, it moves those internalized emotions into something that's externalized, and it can be, when it's labeled, it can then be worked on, or we can think about a way to deal with it and problem solve. For example, a child writes, "So what happened? I heard explosions overhead. What I thought, this might hit us. How I felt, nervous, I had a sick tummy. And what actually happened, things got quieter very soon after that." So again, it gives us a way to process through a sequence of events. And just to mention with journaling as well, depending on your child's age, you could look at doing like draw a monster that represents the feeling that you have at the moment. Or draw a picture, draw colors around how you feel. So it doesn't have to be about writing words down. It can be using pictures and other ways to document how they're feeling to make it more accessible. So in terms of helping with feelings, so the first strategy we look at is the um blow the balloon task. So it's a simple breathing regulation strategy. So what we want our child to do is take a deep breath, and as the balloon deflates, they exhale with it. And we would try and count to three or four as they're doing that to try and emphasize the exhale as they blow out. And then we would repeat that maybe 3 to 5 times. And what this activity helps with is activating our parasympathetic nervous system, or the body's ability to calm itself. This reduces our physiological arousal that's associated with anxiety, fear, anger, or feeling overwhelmed. It helps to shift us from that fight or flight mode into a more calm, regulated state. And that helps us to think about things in a clearer way and problem solve. Another activity that can help with feelings is using the worry box. So we write down a worry and post it in the box. And um, what we find is that when children are ruminating on worries and they're finding it hard to let things go, it helps to externalize anxious thoughts and reduces the constant anxious thinking. So, for example, a child might worry overnight about bombs going off overhead. Instead of repeatedly seeking reassurance, they write their worry. So, what if my house gets hit with a drone? What if my school is hit? And they put it in the worry box. So, during the day, or at a particular time, they can look at this worry with their parent and they problem solve it together. And over time, what we want the child to experience is that they feel more control over their anxious thoughts, and that we have an ability to put it to one side because it's on that piece of paper and we're going to come to that later and it's going to be addressed, but it's not going to be something that we're going to be constantly thinking about. So in the next section, number 7, is helping with behaviors. So things that can help with our behavior, maybe speaking to a trusted adult or a friend, saying things out loud sometimes reduces their intensity. It helps us to get a better sense of what actually is going on and what our emotions are around this topic, and give us a different perspective. It can also help us to problem solve. And this is probably the crux of counselling sessions as well, if you ever experience that. So it's about putting things out there, and it helps us even just by getting it off our chest, um, to feel that we can control the situation a bit more, and that there's going to be a way to work through it. So maybe your child shares with you, "I feel sick every Sunday night because I don't have anyone to sit with in maths class tomorrow." And once you know what the issue is that's causing anxiety, then you can talk to them about what they can try to do to help their situation. Tracking patterns involves noticing when, where, and with whom anxiety shows up. And it helps us to identify triggers and early warning signs. So a child tracks their anxiety for a week and notices that that anxiety for them is highest before PE sessions, for example, or before maths class. And it can be worse when they haven't slept well, or it's better when they sit with a friend, or that it feels lower. So when we have that pattern identified, it's much easier for us to give our child a strategy to cope in that situation. And having more awareness then turns that anxiety into something predictable and much more manageable because we can look at ways to cushion things and change things in the environment to make it a bit easier to cope with. The Do It Anyway challenge involves encouraging our children to, even when they feel anxious, to have a go at something. And it comes back to the concept that we can have two feelings about the same event. So we may feel anxious and scared, but we also um, might feel a bit excited to give something a try. And those two things can exist at the same time, and one doesn't discount the other. But what we find is that when um, we encourage children to give it a try, we show them that it's okay to feel anxious, but it doesn't have to control our behavior. And we find that your child will hopefully find that when they actually give it a try, the outcome wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. And that can build confidence for them to give things a try the next time round. So, for example, a teenager may feel anxious about attending a birthday party and they want to stay at home. So instead of avoiding it altogether, they set a goal that they will go for 30 minutes. And you agree with them that you'll stay in the car and wait outside. And after they arrive, they find that things aren't actually as bad as they thought it was going to be, and they end up staying for the full 3 hours of the party. So because they faced it and gave it a try, their anxiety would decrease naturally, and that reinforced their ability to cope. The anxiety ladder is a CBT tool, and it involves looking at situations that provoke anxiety for a child or teenager and starting off with the lowest level of activity up to the highest level of activity. So if we think about it as an example of a child who's refusing to go to school, so step one might be driving past the school. Step two, walking in the school gate. Step three, enter the reception for 5 minutes. Step three, stay for one lesson. Step four, stay for a half day. So what we want is to try and encourage our children to start off at step one and give it a try and let them see that they can be successful with it. And we want to build that mastery and practice around that first step before we would move on to the next step. So we gradually build them up to having the confidence to move on to the next stage. Um, and then we teach children in this way that by facing our fears, we can gradually overcome them and we can build ourselves up to take on something a bit more stressful later on until eventually we've dealt with the issue altogether. So the final slide that we're going to look at, and probably the most important section really, is about looking at ourselves first before we can be in a place to help our children. We talked about co-regulation earlier in the presentation, and what it means is that a calm, regulated adult can use their presence, their tone, their body language, and emotional steadiness to help a child's nervous system to settle. What we know from research is that children don't learn self-regulation in isolation, that they borrow it from their parents. So if you're highly stressed yourself, it's likely that your child is going to mirror that and they take that from you. And as we mentioned already, it's difficult at the moment to feel calm because of what's going on around us. And it's not always the easiest thing to put on a brave face. But if we can be mindful of that and try and think about our tone of voice, think about our body language, when we're interacting with our children, it can really help them to feel stable, secure, and safe in their environment. Um, and we know that when children are younger, up to the age of 25, actually, our brain is still developing. So that means that up to that age, we can still model this appropriate self-regulation. Um, when the prefrontal cortex is developing up till age 25, it's responsible for planning skills, emotional regulation, and impulse control. So all those things can still be changed and developed as our children and young adults are developing. So when a child is distressed, we find that their amygdala or threat system activates. The stress hormones rise, and again, when we're in that emotional state, our logical brain goes offline. We are focusing purely on our emotional heightened responses first. So when, especially for younger children, when you're regulated yourself, you act as your child's prefrontal cortex because they defer things to you or they seek that calmness from you so that they can return to normal. And obviously, as they get older, that it becomes more of an independent skill. Um, but sorry about that. The connection dropped off. Just to recap then what we were talking about in the last video, we talked about the importance of co-regulation, about how the brain is still developing. We want to facilitate that development of secure attachment between you and your child, and the how we co-regulate and get to their level and attune with their emotions can help to build that strong relationship between the two of you. Um, but then when we think about ourselves and where we're at emotionally and how important it is to keep that in mind as well, um, it can be important to just take a step back and think about the input that we're getting ourselves. Is that causing us anxiety? For example, looking at content on our phone and social media and looking at the news. Um, I personally feel like I find it a bit overwhelming looking at some of the videos and content and the updates being shared. So what we want to try and do is give ourselves the best chance to be regulated first before we try and discuss things with our children or spend time with them. So slowing down our nervous system may mean taking 5 minutes for deep breathing, stepping outside for a bit, going for a quick walk. Each of these activities that help us to calm down can be specific to each individual. So something that I find helpful, you may not necessarily find helpful, and vice versa. But it's about trying to find our own way to calm our nervous systems down. Um, so this idea of a self-calm toolbox is about putting together a list of activities that can help us to feel calm. And then the calmer we feel, the better regulated we are to be there for our children, to help them to calm themselves too. So things that can be included inside our self-calm toolbox are physiological tools or body-based tools, things like breathing, a breathing script card, maybe a grounding object. It could be a smooth stone, something textured, a squeeze ball. It could be having a drink of cold water or ice in our mouth. It could be smelling essential oils or listening to music that helps us to feel more regulated. Cognitive tools might be things like a fact versus fears prompt card. So to remind us about what's true and what maybe is something that we have in our head. We could have a realistic reassurance statement, some written coping reminders for ourselves, or a script that we write down to help us to respond in a calm way to our children. Emotional anchors could also be in the toolbox. So maybe a photo that reminds you of safety. Um, it could be a note that you write to yourself during a calm moment. So again, anything that helps our emotions to feel more regulated. And then behavioural tips or suggestions could be, like I mentioned, the 5 minute walk. Um, it could be that we don't watch news after 8 o'clock, or we try and limit our time on our phone after 8 o'clock, or not use our phone. It could be maybe calling a friend or arranging a social time to speak to meet up with a friend for a coffee. So I hope you found these strategies helpful, and I hope you found the content in general helpful. Um, just to finish up then, final thoughts then. It is obviously nothing that we can't avoid the fact that we're all feeling a bit anxious at the moment. And there is a difference between anxiety that's in response to a traumatic event versus something that's more long-standing and is having an impact on your child's quality of life, and maybe the impact it's impacting your family as well. So if you feel that this situation is something that's been a long-standing issue, or it meets the criteria of what we spoke about earlier, then it is a good idea to get some mental health support for your child. And we've talked through strategies that we can try. So just a quick recap on those. Then we looked at using positive and supportive language, things like normalizing, getting curious, not critical. We talked about establishing connection to build communication. We talked about strategies specific to when we're exposed to a traumatic event like the bombing that we've experienced, or the explosions. Um, we talked about the cognitive behavioural therapy triangle and some of the strategies that help with our thoughts, with our feelings, and with our behaviours. And then finally, we looked at our own self-calm toolbox. This is also something that you can put together with your child. It doesn't have to be just one for yourself, but helping ourselves to regulate first enables this concept of co-regulation to take place. Um, and it's also about giving ourselves the time and space to go through the emotions ourselves. So there, on that final note, co-regulation is key. If you have any questions about any of the content, please feel free to get in touch with myself at Inspire Therapy. My email address is kate@inspiretherapy.ie. That's probably the best way to contact me. Um, so yeah, I hope that things calm down for all of us, and have a good rest of the week. Thanks very much for listening to the content as well.